This conference will now be recorded.
Release branch folder should be created based on the DevOps folder, right? Not with the main branch of the repo. Not the DevOps folder, but the develop branch. It's a develop branch, yes. So it depends upon the develop branch. Main is rebased. We say this is a rebase, meaning whatever code is there in your release, we take that and we put it back into main. So release is not created based on the main; it's created on the develop. Yes. Any more questions here? You're facing some merge conflicts. When are you facing a merge conflict? Okay. 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 So when you're facing a merge conflict, did you try resolve that merge conflict on your local machine? Hmm. Try taking it to your local machine. Take your feature branch, take your main branch into your local machine. Do a git pull. First, pull this out. Your local machine will tell you that there's a merge conflict, and it will tell you what do you want to retain. Is it the one that is there on the cloud, or is it something that you're trying to push? Meaning, is it something that is there in the branch, or is it something that is there inside, let's say, your feature branch out here? Then you can say, what do you want to take? Whether the feature branch changes or the main branch changes, and then you can resolve that particular merge conflict out here. It will replace the existing content in your branches. So you cannot have the same line edited in both. If you want to have both, you can say accept both. I want both the changes out there. That even that is possible out there. Such. Yes. Any more questions? Yes. You have a follow-up question that. I'm sorry. Can you come again, please? Yes. It depends upon the line number on which line that you're editing out there and so on and so forth. So it depends upon the line number. If the file is edited in both the places, then you will have to, let's say, make sure to resolve that and then move forward.
Sir, while I'm
Yes.
comparing the file, hello,
Okay. Good, please.
sir, while I'm comparing the file,
Hmm.
when I'm writing the sixth line, it's not showing in the previous one. When I'm writing the seventh line, it's showing the sixth line.
So I
That
will
is
have to
what
see your history once to understand what is happening there. So that's what I even replied on the email in the morning. That if you can
oh,
show me the file history, if you can show me the Git history, or send me the screenshot of a Git history, then I'll be able to be in a better position to explain why that is, let's say, happening. And based upon that, we can understand why exactly it's not showing that particular line, it's showing the seventh line, and so on and so forth.
okay.
Yes. Any more questions here? Anyone? Any more questions here? All right, so let's go there into dev.azure.com. See where we are. Let's check this out. So we have a project. We have a repository in our project which is called Android, and inside that particular repository, we have a main, or we have our default branch which is called Develop 9.0, and this branch has a policy wherein it is telling you that at least one reviewer must come here and approve this particular code. This is the policy that I do have here, and it is telling that the minimum number of reviewers is one, and allow requesters to approve their own change out here. Because I am the only user that is there inside this project, that's the reason I need to have this option enabled. We'll also add one more user. We'll see how that the other user can, come here and, let's say, approve those changes and all that stuff, which we'll also do that. And there are multiple policies which we'll talk about in, let's say, the coming sessions out here. So I have my branch, let's say, placed in, I have, let's say, all my code inside this, and it's ready to go. So I have the repository, I have the branches inside the repository. I have a, let's say, develop branch in my repository out here, and all the code is being committed inside this particular develop branch. using some kind of a pull request mechanism. There is no direct commit allowed because you have a policy. You cannot do a direct commit. Now what I'll do is that all this code that you have inside this particular branch is a high level code. It's not a converted code out here. So I, as a DevOps engineer, need to give something called as a build pipeline, something known as a build pipeline, which will simply do one thing. It will pull all the code from this particular branch, which is the develop branch of your repository, and use some steps to do something known as a build operation. And what is a build operation, guys? Converting the code from a high level language to binaries, DLLs, or artifacts. We call them as artifacts in Azure DevOps out here. So let's do that. Let's go inside our project, and inside our project, let's go into a service called pipelines. And inside this, you have pipelines, environment, releases, libraries, task groups, and deployment groups. Let's go into something called pipelines out here. And as in when I go to a pipeline, it's telling create your first pipeline. I don't have anything out here. Okay, I'll say not a problem. I'll say go ahead, create this pipeline out here. It's telling where is your code. Azure repositories, or let's say build pipelines in Azure, can connect to different sources, not only Azure repository. You can have your code in Git. You can have your code in GitHub Enterprise. You can have your code in something called Bitbucket. You can have your code in other Git as well. Multiple
Conference
things
will
is
now
something
be
that you can.
recorded.
Guys, please go on mute. All right. Your code, let's say, can be anywhere. Like let's say Azure repositories, Bitbucket, GitHub Enterprise. You can have your code anywhere. And here it tells something known as YAML YAML, which we'll talk about. But let's scroll down. I'll say use classic editor to create a pipeline without a YAML. I'll start with this simplest option. And I'll say click on this one. And as in when I click on this one, it's now telling okay fine. Again, it's telling me to select a source, whether it is Azure repos, sorry, whether it's Azure repos, whether it's a GitHub, whether it's GitHub Enterprise, Subversion, Bitbucket, or some other Git. If you have some other Git, you can also go ahead and give you some other Git out here. But in my case, where do you think my code is? Azure repos Git. Sorry, that's where I saved my code. That's where I stored my code. And inside Azure repos Git, there is a project called what? DevOps Learning 8. Inside that project, there is a repository called what? Android. Inside that repository, there is a branch called Develop 9. It's a default branch, correct? So I'll say, okay, fine, great. All these are the correct parameters. And I will say continue. Now it is asking me, uh, what kind of a code you want to build? Meaning, you have to choose one of the kind of the code that you, let's say, really want to build out here. So can you tell me what are you doing? And let's say if you want to build a Python, you can say Python Python. You can select create and test a Python package for different versions if you have a Python. If you have Java, then you can say build and test a Java project with Apache Ant, or build and test a Java project with Gradle. You have multiple extensions. All these are called extensions out here. In my case, I have what? A .NET application. I'll say, you know what? I have a .NET application, but it's not a .NET desktop. Neither it's an ASP.NET application. This is not the framework that I chose. If I just scroll down, there's something called ASP.NET Core. This is what I have. It's an ASP.NET Core web application that I do have. I'll say, I think this is the right one. And I'll say apply this out. Now, as and when you applied it, Azure DevOps went ahead, created something called as a pipeline for you out here as such. What does this really do? Let's understand this. I will just go ahead, edit this name. This is the name of the pipeline that you have. I'll edit this name and I'll say this is, let's say, sample, or let's say first build pipeline. I can give some random name out here. Good enough. And it is telling there are a couple of options that you need to configure and all that stuff. Let's understand that. Now let's see. Let's compare it with our local machine. Let's compare the pipeline service with a local machine service that we have. And here in the right hand side, I'll say this is my local machine. I'll start with my local machine. Did we do a build on my local machine? Yes. What all do you think I need to do a build on my local machine? Sorry? Code? Exactly. You need a code. Good. I need a code firstly. Then next, what exactly do I need? So .NET related components. Good point out there. Yes, .NET related components, which means in my laptop, if I go into my C drive and if I go into program files, I have a folder called .NET. So this got installed when I was installing Visual Studio. So if I go inside it, there is something called SDK, Software Development Kit. If I go inside this, I have something called .NET 6 and I have a lot of things out here. Like there are a lot of files out here and all that stuff, which will help me do a build operation. Because one thing that you have to understand, guys, is that see, .NET is a high level language. Your operating system cannot directly understand this. Your operating system needs to understand or if it needs to understand the language of .NET, it needs to have some kind of a software which will help it to convert the same thing. That software for me is an SDK, which is a .NET SDK out here. Again, if you just go online and search for .NET SDK, it says download .NET SDKs. You have multiple versions of it. If you just go here and it's telling you have multiple things, and I also want to go ahead and download the .NET Core 3.1 because my code is in .NET Core 3.1. So I click on this and install this out. So it's telling, okay, fine, you're good to go, install this out and all that stuff. So again, if you are using, let's say, .NET 3.1, please go ahead, do a simple installation out here. So yes, you are right. You will need the .NET SDKs out here to go ahead and do some kind of an operation out here as such. Anything else that I need? Server. When you say server, what server do you mean by it? I mean, when you say server, what exactly do you mean out here? Sorry? Virtual machines. Let's say I do not have a virtual machine. I'm doing this on my local machine. So then do I need a virtual machine now? Do I need a virtual machine? Yes, no, maybe. Anything else that I need? I have the code. I have the .NET SDK. Anything else that I need here? Would I need an operating system? The very bare basic. Don't I? Or would I need an operating system? OS? I need an OS to understand all these things. I need an OS to interact with, right? OS. And I'm using a Windows 11 OS right now. And finally, I need my laptop itself, right? I need my laptop itself. So, which means if I say laptop, I'm telling I need a hardware, meaning I need space, I need RAM, and also when you observed .NET code was not building when I ran out of space. Again, I had to, let's say, format and all that stuff, which means I need RAM, I need, let's say, the hardware, I need, meaning the entire hardware component like RAM, memory, and processing power, and etc. I then need an OS, and then I need something known as .NET code or .NET SDK out here, which can act as a mediator between my OS and the code. And after all these things, what I can do is that if you look at my code, right, that I have, let's go into my folder. let's say downloads, or where was it? Here you have Android, and here you have that particular .NET code out here. You have, let's say, inside, if I go inside this one, I have my pages, I have HTML and all that stuff. If I want to build this code, now I have that code that you said. I have the .NET SDK, I have the operating system, I also have the hardware. All those components is something that I do have. I now want to do a code build. What should I do right now? Visual Studio. So one of the options is Visual Studio. Go to Visual Studio, do a right click, and then it will go and do a restore and a build and then a publish. These are the things that it does. But if you do not have Visual Studio, you have .NET installed. What you can do, yes, go please. You can copy this code in Git. Yes, yes, build pipeline. But before I go to build pipeline, I would also need to do the same thing on local to help understand what is the difference between local and let's say this one. Again, if you don't have Visual Studio installed, not a problem. Please make sure to install the software called .NET Core. This is a lightweighted software. Come here into your code. Wherever you see all your code, come here, type in CMD. This is going to open command prompt in the same folder out here. Now, either you go to Visual Studio or you come to CMD, it's one and the same. When you click on Visual Studio and say build, there are two things that happens. One restore, second is build, which means Visual Studio in the background is opening this particular command line and running a command called .NET space restore. As in when you do it, it's saying determining projects to restore. It's telling this is the project to restore. So you're interacting with a .NET software that is installed. Then you did a restore. Second thing that I'll do is I'll say .NET build, and it's now telling, even a build is trying to determine the project to restore, restoring the projects and also doing a build. Finally, it's telling I build your project and etc. Then I do something called .NET publish. It's now telling I have created something called as a publishable version of your project. So if I go here into something called bin, debug, into .NET, into something called publish, I have all the code published into something called as DLLs, binaries and etc. So I ran these three commands: .NET restore, .NET build, .NET publish out here. These are the three commands that I wrote. So can I also put this under my list, telling I also need the commands to go ahead and run commands. Go ahead and do what? Build, publish, and also, or build, restore, and publish, or restore, build, and publish. This is the order. And when I'm doing a restore or a build or a publish, right? If you look at this, if I firstly do a restore, it's understanding, determining projects to restore, and is looking for what? A CS project file. So it's telling, what? CS project file is my main file. If I want to do anything like build, restore, or publish, I will go into this file, understand what are the components, and then do a build, restore, and this one. Same thing with publish. It's telling, okay, fine, determining projects to restore. I determine the projects to restore out here. It's going ahead and doing a publish out here. So that particular CS project file is important for you, which is a part of your code. Now, my question to you all is that these are all the things that you need. You need your code. You need a CS project file to be a part of your code. You need the .NET SDK. You need the OS. You need the hard drive. You need the commands, etc. But I am telling I should not do this on my local machine because it gets heavily influenced by the operating system of my local machine, which will not give you the best, let's say, results out here. That's the reason I want to do this on the cloud using a pipeline. Now tell me, should I require the commands? Yes. Yes, I will need the commands. I will need to do the commands. Same thing. Do I require the code? Yes, I already have the code. In what? In a Git repository or in Azure repos. .NET SDKs. Yes, I need. But where should I install the .NET SDKs? Correct. I selected .NET Core. But for me to select .NET Core, I need to have it pre-installed. I need to have it installed somewhere, right? So if I'm saying I need to install, now what did I do before, let's say, starting? I went to .NET. I downloaded the .NET software, installed it. Where did I install it? On my local machine. Now, in the pipeline also, I need some kind of a .NET software. Okay, let's say I need .NET software. Yes, I'll give a tick. I need this. We'll figure out how to install it later. Do I need an operating system? Yes, no, no. Then how will I build it? Pipeline. But even pipeline needs some kind of an operating system, right? When you say pipeline, even that needs some kind of a processing power. I will say yes. I will say yes out here as well. You will need the operating system. You will need the hardware. You will need a Git based repository. You will need the commands on all these things out. I know the commands. I have the Git. But now my question is, let's come down from the bottom. Where will I get the hardware from? Where do you think will I get the hardware from out here?
From cloud.
From the cloud data centers, yes. When you say from the cloud, what do you mean by this exactly? Can you give me an example of the hardware on the cloud? Virtual machines, very good.
So virtual
VMs,
hardware.
virtual hardware, exactly, which is in the form of a virtual machine out here. OS, virtual machine, when you create it, you will have an OS installed out here. You can install .NET SDKs on the virtual machine, same like you did on the local. Git, and this is sorted. This is something that you have. Now, my question is that, do you want to go into your Azure portal and create a virtual machine and use that virtual machine as a build server? This is what I'm now telling, is that do you want to use a virtual machine that is there on the Azure portal and use this as a build server? The reason I'm calling it as a build server and not a web server, as I'm not hosting my website now, I'm using this machine to do what? A build operation. So I'm telling that this is a build server. This is the very first thing that you need to replicate the hardware. Whatever hardware that you have, you to replicate the hardware, you need something called what? A build server out here. So my question to you all is that, do you want to create this? Do you want to maintain this? Or do you want to take Microsoft's help to go ahead and get this? You have two options. You can build it on your own, or you can go request Microsoft, ask them for a build server out here. What do you choose? Or based on the cost. Okay, good point. Based on the cost. Sorry, IS. If you request Microsoft, it's a SaaS. It's not even a pass. It's a SaaS. You're directly consuming it. You have two options out here. If you go ahead and create an IaaS, meaning you are creating a virtual machine, maintaining that virtual machine, and etc. This will be called as a self-hosted agent. Agent here, nothing. It means that it's a machine. That's it. If you are going with Microsoft, you're telling Microsoft that, you know what, I need an agent and etc. It's called Microsoft hosted agent, and that's what your pipeline is asking you for. Is that, can you tell me what kind of an agent do you need? Do you want Azure, meaning Microsoft, to give you, or do you want your own private agents? So here you have what? Hosted option, or you have what? Private option. Private is also called as self-hosted. Hosted is also called as Microsoft hosted out here. So now it's telling, do you want to go for hosted? Do you want to go for private? To begin with, I will say, okay, fine. Let me hold on with private. I will go with the hosted service, the simplest option that is available. I will say, give me something called as the Azure pipelines. It's a hosted service out here. Now it's asking me, okay, I will give you the hosted service, but can you tell me what kind of an operating system you want? Hardware, I'll take care of it. But can you tell me what kind of an operating system you want? And here, if I just click on this one, do you want a Mac OS? Do you want a Linux in the form of Ubuntu? Or do you want Windows? I'll say, you know what, I need a Windows latest. So what Microsoft will do in the background is that when it creates or when you run the pipeline in the background, it will go create a machine, install this particular Windows latest, which is Windows 2022 server on that machine, install the .NET SDKs and etc., and then go ahead and give you that particular machine out here. This is a hosted agent service. But if you want your own service, let's say that you don't want to go for a hosted service for XYZ reasons. We'll also talk about in which cases you don't want to go for a hosted service out here. So if you want your own machine, let's say you're a company who already has invested a lot in on-premise service. You already have, let's say, a lot of on-premise service, or you're a company who has a lot of EC2 instances. When I say EC2, it's nothing but virtual machine equivalent in an AWS cloud. If you have EC2 instances, or if you have instances running on, let's say, a Google cloud, whichever cloud it is, not a problem, you can convert it into your own build server. Microsoft allows you to do that. We'll also see how do you do a build server out there. So now I'll tell, okay, fine, I need a hosted service. I'll start with hosted. Now it's telling, what is the project to restore and build? Can you tell me, where is your CS project file? Where is my CS project file right now? Local machine? Is it anywhere else? Git repository? I already have this. In which repository? Android 9.0. I just go here into this particular repository, click on this file. This is my CS project file. I'll just click on this and you will have the link to it. That what is the path of the file. Just copy this out, go back. Now I am specifically telling my pipeline that, you know what, this is a file you need to target, because in a local machine, I was running all my commands in the same folder. So it was just able to go into that folder, identify what is the file, and I was able to, let's say, get this. But in a pipeline, I'll have to specifically mention what is my file. You can also give something called wildcards. You can say star, star, and all these things. And you can say any pattern, not a problem. Whatever is the file name, not a problem. If you find that CS project file, go ahead and get that out.